In this video, we're going to look at some basic navigation commands in both the standalone version and the plugin version. There are some similarities in behavior between the two, and there are some differences. Let's start with looking at the plugin version like you see in front of you here. Now, when you work with Melodyne as a plugin inside of a DAW, its transport is slaved to that of the DAW. It works in sync with it, so it follows the DAW's playback and positioning. In the standalone version, however, the playback is controlled by the transport keys. And you see here in the plugin version, there's no transport buttons up here like we saw in the last video. So if I hit play in my DAW, this will follow. And if I reposition and hit play, it jumps and stays perfectly in sync. So it's slaved together like that. In the standalone version, however, there are some differences. Let's switch to that. I have another file opened here in the standalone version. And what you can do is hit the space bar to start and stop playback. And what you can do is hit the Alt key. On Mac, this is the Option key. On Windows, it's the Alt key. They're both basically the same. But you can hit the Alt key with the space bar, and what it'll do is confine the playback to whatever blobs you have selected. So for example, if I just rubber band select those few there and I hit Option space bar, it plays back only the selected area. I can also start playback by hitting the Enter key, and the 0 key will stop playback. So enter to start playback, 0 to stop. And if I double click the 0 key, it goes right back to the beginning. So those are some of the differences between the transport functions in the standalone version and the plugin version. And I'm going to spend the rest of this video now explaining some commands that work the exact same way in both the plugin and the standalone version. So what you can do is double click in the bar ruler to start playback. Or you can double click anywhere in the background and it'll start playback from wherever you double click. Now this works the same inside the DAW. We said that the transport is slaved to the DAW, but when you have the plugin window opened, you can still work with it independently of your DAW. So I can double click here. And I can double click in the background. And what I can do is add the Alt key to that to confine playback to the selection, just like we could with the spacebar before. So I'll select a few notes and double click here with the Alt key. And it automatically stops at the end. Let's switch back to the standalone version, and we'll see now that if I select a blob, I can use the left and right arrow keys to step through each blob and hear it. Backwards or forwards. I can click in the bar ruler to move or set the position. You've seen me do that before in the other videos, but I just want to cover it for the sake of being thorough. So just click there to move the position of where the playhead is. And once we're on the bar ruler, what I can do is click, hold, and drag in the bar ruler to scrub the audio. So useful for positioning yourself, and the same thing works in the plugin version. The next thing I want to show you is that you can use the scroll tool or command click in order to scroll the display. Now the tools are over here. There's a toolbar with many different functions. We're going to cover all of them in due time, but to start with, the main tool over here, when you click hold, you get a drop-down menu, and if you select the first one underneath, that's called the scroll tool, and you can just zoom the positioning, or not really zoom, but move the positioning of the display like that. Let's go back to the regular version. And I can do the same thing by holding the command key down. It's sort of like a permanent toggle to allow for permanent access to that alternate tool, that scrolling tool. Underneath that, we have the zoom tool, the second one down, and you can get to that either that way or by key command, Command Alt, and then mouse dragging around. So hold down the Command and Alt key, turns to the magnifier tool, and you can zoom the display both horizontally and vertically like that. Now, if you Command Alt double click, what you can do is zoom in on a selection. So for example, I have these notes selected. So with those same buttons pressed, Command and Alt, I just double click. It zooms in on the selection, and I can Alt, Command, double click in the background to step back, or keep those buttons down and then just zoom like that. Now further, we have the scroll bars on the left and right that double these functions. So we can scroll like this, vertically, or horizontally here, and we have a little convenient overview of the waveform. But also at the end of the scroll bars, we get zoom functions. So if you grab in the middle, you're scrolling, but if you grab at the end, you're zooming the display, and that works for both the left and right end on both the horizontal or vertical axis. So there's lots of different little hot spots or hot zones in those scroll bars. Now, what you can also do is double click in the middle of the scroll bar, and it'll zoom to fit the entire contents into the selection. So let me double click in the middle, and now I'm zoomed horizontally, and I'll double click in the middle there, and I'm zoomed vertically. And again, these function identically in the standalone version. And related to this, we can alter the height of the blobs with this slider here. Let me zoom so we can see the blobs like that, and this slider will magnify or decrease the actual visual feedback of the blob sizes. It doesn't affect volume, it's strictly for visual reference. I like it up personally. Now I want to show you how the cycle works. Basically, we can click and drag in the bar ruler to scrub, but if we click in the lower part, we can create a little cycle area for it to repeat over and over again. So what I can do is do this in this version or in the standalone version, and it works the same way, but of course it only works like this here when the transport is stopped, when the host DAW is not playing. So you set a cycle range like that, and you can double click inside to turn it on or off, and you'll see that the area that's designated as the cycle range is shaded a lighter color, but double clicking will turn it on and off like that, and it changes colors to give you the visual feedback. What you can also do is use the cycle button in the standalone version. It's not available here because we don't have dedicated transport controls, but here, if we have a cycle set up like that, we can use the button over here to turn it on and off in addition to double clicking. Let's go back to the plugin version. And what you can do is drag the left or right handles when it's on in order to decrease or increase the range of the cycle. And you'll see that it snaps to the grid. In this case, we're viewing in seconds. We can change how this grid is displayed. We'll look at that in another video. But it's basically snapping to rounded increments based on the display values here. What you can do is hold down Alt while you're dragging in order to move it freely and not have it snap to the grid. In this case, seconds, but as I say, could easily be bars or beats. So Alt key allows for free movement. What you can also do is click, hold, and drag in the middle to move the entire cycle. And again, it's snapping to the grid, but if you add Alt to that, you can move it freely, free of the grid. You can shift click at the end to increase or decrease the range. Let's say I want it to go all the way till there. I'll just shift click and it jumps to there, shift click and it jumps to there. But again, it rounds off to the nearest grid quantization. And if you add Alt to that when you're shift clicking, it'll do it non-rounded and go to exactly the area that you're clicking at. And finally, what we can do, and I find this very useful, is we can set the cycle range to match a selection here. So if we want to work on a specific area and hear it over and over again, you can do that. And in this case, I have these notes selected. So if I shift double click in the cycle range here, it's going to automatically snap to fit the selection, rounded to the nearest grid increments. And if I shift double click with the Alt key, like that, it'll fit exactly the selection and not round it off to the nearest second in this case. So those are some useful ways of using the cycle functions within Melodyne. That's it. Stay tuned, and I'll see you for more in the next video.